losing a job, like it was my source of income for paying all my bills and making sure that I can get food and all those things. It sets like this precedent in the workplace that it's not okay to stand up for your rights, even if there's a lot of violations of worker protections that already exist. I wasn't unionizing my job. I was just trying to assert our rights to safe and sick leave.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup.
This is Ashley with Status Coup.
On the ground.
In Philadelphia.
Flint, Michigan. East Palestine, Ohio. Please support the leading independent news outlet on the ground,
covering what the corporate media covers up. Hi, this is Ashley Bishop with Status Coup, and I am very happy to be joined today by Hannah Lopez and Jonathan Bailey, who are working on a case that might help workers get more sick leave benefits. So we will get started. I'm just going to have them both introduce themselves and give a little bit on their background and how they got involved with this case, and what the implications could be for labor. So Hannah, we will start with you. So just a little bit about your background, all that kind of stuff. What do you want viewers of Status Coup to know about you before we talk about your case?
Absolutely. So my name is Hannah Lopez. I am a worker that was organizing to help educate my fellow coworkers about safe and sick leave rights and asserting our right to protect our safe and sick leave rights against some violations that were going on in the workplace. And I was fired shortly after asserting those rights. And yeah, that's why I'm here today.
Okay, and that is a good reason to be here. And again, we'll talk more about Hannah's case. And Jonathan, what about you? How did you get involved with this? What is your background like?
Hey, my name's Jonathan Bailey. I'm one of the founders of Amazonians United. We had a case that went through the Department of Consumer Worker and Worker Protections. That's the city agency that protects our sick leave rights. And it took 4 years for it to go through the city agency in order to have our rights protected. So I've become fairly familiar with the way that these rights exist, both on the shop floor for workers and also how our government relates to protecting those rights. So I've been involved in trying to make sure that we're protecting these rights for all New Yorkers, for the millions of us that rely on them.
Absolutely, that is great. And I should say, I met you both at the DSA watch party the other night. I had interviewed both of you about why you were there, why you had come out for Zoran. So just a little bit of background. That's how we all met. That's how I found out about Hannah's case and found out about Jonathan's involvement. So again, super excited to talk about this. Not something I had been aware of before then. So I think this is going to be really interesting. So Hannah, you had said, essentially, you were fired. You're a worker. You were fired for trying to assert your right to have paid sick leave. Can you, and alerting your coworkers about, the fact that they have that too, all that kind of stuff. So can you expand a little bit more on like what happened before you got fired, and then we can get into the actual case and why it's important for all workers to be paying attention to.
So there were a lot of violations going on pertaining to safe and sick leave rights here in our New York City, protected statutes. And people were coming to work sick. I work in a restaurant, obviously, so we're also public facing, serving food and beverages to the public. So it was an issue of a public health issue as much as it was getting our fellow coworkers sick.
And I just want to interrupt for 2 seconds just to say, like you said, you worked at a restaurant. So as I remember, you were waitressing
Yes.
at that restaurant. Okay.
Yes. So I was waitressing at this restaurant. I worked for this company for 10 years. I had a short pause during COVID. I lost my job, but then they rehired me back into the company. And then there were just a lot of violations happening. And we essentially, I authored this petition to address these safe and sick leave violations. We collected a lot of the signatures. It was around, I think, 60 signatures or so from front and back of house. Then I handed this petition to management, respectfully asking to stop violating our rights and also to remedy any situations in which people had to spend a lot of money getting, excuse me, COVID tests, which some of my coworkers were spending like hundreds of dollars on. Yeah, it was very expensive because they didn't have health insurance, and they were required. There was other violations happening, like they were requiring us to get a COVID test by noon the next day if you called out, which is against the law. You can only ask for any type of like doctor's note or anything like that if you call out for 2 days in a row. And if it costs money, if the doctor's note costs money, your employer has to pay for it. So people were spending a lot of money. Some people were told that they can't come back to work until they get like COVID tests, even if it wasn't COVID. Like people had the flu, people had food poisoning, whatever other issue it may have been. And there was also this policy where they were trying to enforce us having to call out 4 hours before our shift started. And I essentially had this coworker who came to work with like a pirate eye patch on their eye. And we were like, what are you wearing? And they said that they had an eye infection and there was like pus coming out of their eye. And we were like, well, why didn't you call out? And they were like, well, I woke up 3 hours before my shift. They had worked late the night before. So they were too afraid to call out because people were getting, like written up or whatever the retaliation was for not following their protocol, even though that is against the law. You can call out even 1 minute before your shift because you can't help when you get sick. Oh, it looks like we lost Jonathan. But so there was like all these so there was all these like instances of people coming to work sick or spending a lot of money. So we tried to address that. And then 2 months after, I handed this petition to management, and I was the one who personally handed the petition to management. They fired me and said that my ethos doesn't align with the company anymore, and that was the reason they fired me after 10 years. So yeah.
I just have to say that is crazy. Like the excuse given, your ethos does not align with the companies anymore. That is pretty clear. Like you guys were organizing to assert the rights that you have, and then you were fired. And I guess the ethos that doesn't align is, that you believe in labor rights and following the law and all of that. I mean, and it's also just like insane. The idea that you need to get COVID testing, like, okay, fine. You need to get COVID testing before you come back to work. Perfectly fair. But if it's going to cost hundreds of dollars, workers are already like, if you're waitressing, like I have done all of that before. I have worked in cafes. I have been a waitress. Yes. Like if you miss a shift, I mean, that could put you in serious, like, that is income for a whole day that you're missing out on. And that could mean missed bills. That could mean not being able to afford your rent in the beginning of the next month. It could mean any, number of things like that. So people, I think, are reluctant probably to call out from work anyway, unless you absolutely need to. And then the idea that on top of missing that day of work, you then have to pay money for your COVID testing, that, as you said, your employer should be paying for that, especially if they're mandating that you cannot come back to work until you've had that testing, you've been cleared. They should be paying for that, especially like, again, if you're working at a restaurant, you don't have health insurance. You don't have health insurance, and many people probably don't qualify for Medicaid because it's, you might make a little bit over the line. I think that sometimes happens, but like, making like a couple $100 over the line that would have you qualifying for those public benefits does not mean that you're okay.
Yeah,
it just doesn't.
Exactly.
So one of the things that we've like found or been able to establish through this process, right? It's already really clearly based on statute that it is a violation of our rights for the employer to require any kind of documentation, doctor's notes, or anything like that for a single day or 2 days of being gone from work. After that, they can require something, but it's because oftentimes it's used as a way of actually, abusing people's sick leave rights to really discourage any kind of use of those rights. What's interesting in this circumstance is that they attached to something that they didn't require a doctor's notice, right? But they required documentation of a test that, for some folks, on the high end, we're paying $400 for this test, right? basically completely nullifying any aspect of sick leave rights that is actually useful, right? The whole point is to ensure that people can be sick and have a day off from work, and still be able to not take a hit to their income. You know, they've earned that sick leave, and so they can use it at their discretion. One of the things that we were able to establish through this process, though, is it is now law in New York City that they can't use like requirements of different tests as a way of discouraging people of using their sick leave. So that is one victory that we've had through this process. That's you know, that's now established, you know, through administrative rulemaking by the Department of Consumer and Worker Protections. So that's now something that all New Yorkers can be sure of. If your employer is requiring any kind of like testing, documentation of any kind, for just being sick for 1 or 2 days, that is a violation of the ESTA statutes.
Okay, so wait, just to back up a little bit. So this is something that has come as a result of the court case that you guys are bringing?
So
or it's something that like you're highlighting?
Well, so it's something that has come as a product of this, of moving this forward. So obviously, one of the interesting aspects of our earned safe and sick time rights is that we have a dual pathway for enforcement of those rights. That's really cool and not entirely common, right? So the first pathway that was established when the legislation was passed was that the Department of Consumer and Worker Protections would be the city agency tasked with upholding those rights.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the issue was that there would be a lot of troubles if a company just refused to grant those rights. So, for instance,
Sure.
At Amazon, you know, our case that we put forward, where Amazon was violating everybody's sick leave rights, it took 4 years to go through the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. And if a company, you know, if a company can just deny you your rights for 4 years, then they functionally don't exist, right? It's a nullification.
Yeah.
So what City Council did last year, in 2024, City Council passed legislation that granted us a right of action. So we could take those rights and we could enforce them in court, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is super cool because, you know, that's a much more powerful tool to have those rights upheld, which really is kind of what has brought us to where we're at now, where, you know, this is a conflict over defining how do courts enforce those rights. Do they enforce them in such a manner that allows people to actually, you know, have access to those rights, or is there going to be a process that, you know, basically reestablishes a lengthy delay in being able to have any kind of enforcement? So the aspect of the rights that you just asked about, establishing that, you know, companies can't be requiring tests or documentation of any kind as a way of getting around the legislation's specification of no doctor's notes requirement until somebody's been out of work for 72 hours. That has come through way of administrative rulemaking. So through the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, they've determined that that is a violation of our rights, similar to the way that, you know, any other government agency, you know, looks to see how best to exercise or enforce the law. So that's established already through the agency, which is awesome. And now we're in a process of establishing something through the courts that will ensure that, you know, if you're fired for teaching your coworkers about their rights, like Hannah was, that, you know, courts can off that as a violation in weeks, so that you can be returned to work in weeks, as opposed to, you know, determining that it requires a much longer process that can leave you out of work for years, you know, basically nullifying the legislation, like, you know, how we at Amazon experience, where it took us 4 years to have our rights enforced.
That, I mean, that's all great. And I think that that is like, I can't overstate how important that actually is. Because we've seen, as you know, the labor movement has kind of grown over the last, I don't know, handful of years, let's say, where we saw Starbucks United, Amazon, and you know, it's kind of taken off from there. But we've seen people be fired for their organizing and then not be reinstated. And, you know, and that is a tactic, as you're suggesting. Like, that is a tactic that is designed so that people who were organizing are not going to be directly involved. And because they're directly involved, not directly involved, that stymies the organizing that they're doing. It prevents people from actually continuing their organizing efforts to get unions, to get, you know, XYZ. So this is really important. And again, like, there have been plenty of workers involved with Starbucks United and at Amazon who have been fired because of this. And they spend so much time not being working, not being involved in the unionizing efforts, because they're waiting you know, for the courts to order them to be reinstated. So this is really, really important. And I guess I would back up a little bit before we talk about any more like broad implications of like what will happen with this case, where you guys expect it to go, all of that. I guess I would just ask Hannah, like, you were fired, that happened. What did you do from there? I mean, that's a traumatic experience, especially since, you know, the reasons that you were fired, that is, you know, you lost your income, all of that. And it's, you know, being fired from a job, especially if you are being fired partially because of some kind of organizing, or not partially, I mean, because of organizing for, you know, people to be able to use their sick leave benefits. Mm-hmm. That makes it, you know, easier, more difficult, I would imagine, to start the job hunt again.
Yes.
And that kind of thing. So what happened after you got fired? When did you make the decision to say, like, no, I'm not going to take this. I am going to bring this case to court?
So the private right of action actually started this year. I was fired last July, so I've been out of work for about a year now, and I'm definitely feeling it. But because of you know, just I started the process actually right away. I went straight to the DCWP and I filed a complaint with them. And, you know, the process takes a while. They have to do an investigation. You need to give them, you know, the evidence. And then we have to wait for responses from, you know, the other side. And, you know, the other side, you know how like companies can kind of like drag out deadlines and things like that. So this has obviously been a part of this, which is why it's, you know, taken longer. But when we found out about the private right of action, this year, we're like, okay, well, like maybe we can speed up the process. Let's, you know, take it to the courts, and that's why we decided to do it like this, and this is why we're taking the case in this direction. But as far as like everything that's happened, yeah, absolutely, it's you know, losing a job, like it's your, you know, it was my source of income for paying all my bills and making sure that I can get food and all those things. But I would also say that it sets like this like precedent in the workplace that it's not okay to stand up for your rights, even if there's a lot of violations of worker protections that already exist. You know, I mean, I wasn't even I wasn't unionizing my job. I was just trying to assert our rights to safe and sick leave. It's not a good thing all around for workers, and I mean, obviously as well for the public health as well, because, you know, if people keep coming to work sick or whatever's going on, it just sets like a bad, you know, like precedent for everything. So yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, there's a couple things that you said. I mean, obviously the public health element, you know, that's something that never really gets talked about. Like if you are a restaurant worker, you're a waitress, you're handing people their food. Like, does the public really want someone who is sick passing, you know, their food to them? I mean, I wouldn't, and not like, I'm not a germaphobe, not in that kind of way, but just in a like, I'd rather not be sick if I don't need to be. And I'd rather someone who is sick be able to just take the time that they can to get better. And there are some people who are immunocompromised and that kind of thing. Like that is, as you said, it's a public health issue. I can only imagine the kind of like, I don't know, daily struggle that is extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's been hard. It's also been hard too because of like having to, you know, I haven't had legal representation for most of the time. So I've been what is called a pro se litigant, representing myself. So, you know, I've had to do a lot of like the legal work and getting all the evidence together. And, you know, I'm not a legal expert, so it's like taking a lot of time and trying to study how to do it properly. And yeah, it's time consuming. It's not easy. So it's very challenging for working class people in general to have their rights upheld in general. Like if you go through a process like this and you're trying to make sure that remedies can be, you know, you can like win remedies and things like that. It's nearly impossible unless you actually have help, and getting help is actually very hard too. So
I can only imagine. Maybe someone will see this and decide to throw some pro bono work at you guys. That would be awesome. Just throwing it out there for anyone who might be watching. I mean, so you do have the backing of some organizations. So can you guys talk about like who is supporting you? How hard has it been to get other organizations to come out and say like, yes, like we are supporting this court case, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so when I mentioned that I've been most of the time I've been a pro se litigant, we actually did just secure help. But Jonathan, it seemed like you wanted to say something, so I'm going to let you speak.
No. Go ahead. I'm having a great time.
So yeah, I just secured some legal help from Oughton and Golden, from a labor lawyer, and he's been super great and helping me navigate this process. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And that was a very recent thing, but yeah, that's so I'm very, very lucky that I was able to secure that. But it has been a long process to just get to this point, and yeah, so hopefully that yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, I was just gonna say we also are super fortunate to be receiving, Jeannie Meyer as well has contributed to the case. So huge shout out to Michael Scamone and Jeannie Meyer, both titans of the New York City workers, and just supporting workers' rights in New York. Both titans of doing so. So we're super thankful to be able to so much help from them. About Balance and National Employment Law Project are some of the folks who really made the initial push. Really, were kind of the impetus behind the legislation of earned safe and sick leave itself. We're happy that they're in our corner and want us to win. And it's important specifically because city council members, legislators in general, legislators follow they follow what the public sentiment is and what it looks like, right? And so having organizations like National Employment Law Project and A Better Balance, who were helped create the legislation that communicates that this is safe, it's okay, you can take city council, right? You don't need to be afraid. But we're also really stoked about having support from a lot of different worker centers, including Brand Workers, Laundry Workers Center, Flushing Workers Center, en masse national mobilization against sweatshops. And then, a lot of other interesting ways that this has come together. I mean, we've had, we've been fortunate to have support from ACT UP, which is, you know, a really classic, you know, organization in LGBTQ history, really, fighting for healthcare rights in relationship to LGBTQ individuals for the longest time, right? But then we've also had the Quakers jump into support. So, like, you know, this is one of those issues that really just affects everybody. Yes, those of us who are kind of on the pioneering edge of, you know, trying to figure out, hey, how do we make sure that we're supporting workers' rights? But, you know, we're having like LGBTQ folks and you know, religious groups hop in to support as well, because it's sick leave rights. It's an issue that just affects all of us as human beings, and it's a great way for, it's also just like a really great way for us to come together to fight, you know, for our common interests, you know, for like human decency, you know. So it's been super exciting just seeing all of those different groups of people coming together.
Yeah, I mean, that's wonderful. And I remember, Hannah, when we were talking about this the other night, you had said also like Labor Network for Sustainability.
Yes.
They're also supporting you guys, which is great. They're a wonderful organization. So you guys have a very, I don't know,
diverse group of folks. Yeah. But as Jonathan said, like, it really does apply to everybody. You know, safe and sick leave rights in New York City don't actually, like, not every single like working person is qualified under the earned safe and sick leave, but, you know, coming to work sick still affects everyone, you know what I mean? So it does apply to everybody in that capacity. But yeah, it does. Yeah. So everyone's on board with it.
Yeah. And I think as people should be, I mean, so to get back to like the kind of like broader implications of this, before I ask like what you guys are actually expecting, if the case goes the way you would want it to, what are the broader implications for this? How does this affect people beyond, you know, anyone who is thinking about sick leave and that kind of stuff? How does this help the labor movement as a whole? Like, why is this case potentially an extremely important case? Whoever wants to answer.
Well, I think that one of the things that we should probably start with, you know, because, and maybe we probably should have started framing the conversation this way, but we have like only just a few weeks to protect the Earned Safe and Sick Time Act enforcement, right? So that's like what this all is really about, is that we have a few weeks in order to protect these rights. Otherwise, we end up in a situation where companies know that they can violate our rights and get away with it, right? So the real thing on the table right now is the question: can employers in New York City, you know, just violate our rights flagrantly and get away with it for, you know, years? Or are we going to be able to have a mechanism that is strong enough that it can stop clear violations when they're happening? So that's really what's on the table here. As far as like broader implications, obviously, I mean, 20% of people who get fired end up having housing problems, right? So this is about keeping people in their homes, keeping food on the table for their people's kids. It has a ton of ripple effects in terms of the material conditions, right? But so all of these other issues in relationship to, like, for instance, if we're coming together to fight for our rights in any kind of way, right? Which, you know, sick leave being a basic fundamental, like, I mean, it makes sense for it to be understood as our human rights, just because this is the way that people's rights are protected in terms of their access to healthcare as well. So, like, the other direct implication is that this decides things like, hey, if you recognize that you have something is wrong, right, and you need medical attention in any kind of way, right, you're put in a position where you're trying to decide whether you're willing to risk your job or risk your health. That's just an unfair position for human beings to be in. We should be able to have healthcare issues addressed when they need to be addressed, without, you know, questioning whether it will result in you being homeless or not being able to feed your kids. That is a super important piece of this case, and it is also one of the reasons why we really hope, you know, we see the potential to win, because you know, a lot of times when, you know, you can't, it has been understood many times in our country that if somebody is preventing you from access to healthcare, that is just there. You just can't do that. Courts will stop you or stop anybody who's interfering with somebody's access to their like, not just healthcare, but like direct, like, medical treatment, right? So that's one of the implications of this case. And then, of course, the point of like, hey, can we come together and ask for our rights, you know, and not be immediately retaliated against by, you know, like, you know, by the folks who want to keep us working and creating value for them, right? Like, the question for us, like at Amazon, definitely was like, hey, you know, we have this situation where, you know, Jeff Bezos is richer than God, and yet still is in a position where he's violate our sick leave rights. You know, there's this question of just, hey, are we going to try to ensure rights that, you know, not even really balance the power, because it doesn't do that, but hey, should we have like some basic human decency being granted to people who are sometimes the most exploited or impoverished workers?
Yeah, I mean, that's all extremely well put. And again, like it speaks to these super basic things. Super basic things. Do we have the right to stand up for ourselves without being retaliated against? Do we have the right to be sick? I mean, and again, as you said, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying exactly. Yeah. Do we have the right to be sick?
Yeah, a very human thing that I don't think any of us can actually help. And, you know, I think people would probably prefer to not get sick. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to be put in that position. But yeah, a super basic human right that is totally unavoidable. Yeah, so I mean, this case obviously has some very clear implications, some very clear reasons for why people should be paying attention to what's happening here. Mm-hmm. So you have a couple of weeks. So it's like July 14th. What happens in a couple of weeks? Can you explain for viewers what's going on right now, what this first milestone is, and what happens after?
So yes, our date for our response is July 14th. So yes, about 2.5 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. Oh wait, today's Thursday. Sorry, I'm so tired. I've been doing so much stuff all week with this election and this labor campaign that we're doing to protect safe and sick leave rights.
You guys are busy, and again, lots of excitement. So,
what's that?
You're busy, and there's been tons of excitement. So I think you've earned being a little tired.
Yeah, absolutely. Earned being a little sick. No, I'm just kidding. So right now we've our focus mainly has been obviously to secure some legal help, because the legal stuff is very difficult. You know, takes a lot of expertise. There's a reason people go to school for years for this. So we're very grateful that we got that. Another main focus was to get support from different organizations and people who care about, you know, the community at large, working people at large. So, you know, anybody, just literally anybody, anyone who wants to help protect safe and sick leave rights for New York City working class people. And now we have started to try to shift and figure out how to get more individuals to sign this letter that we have. Just so that way we can show the city council, like, hey, it's not just, you know, all these organizations across the city from various different groups, but it's also just regular everyday working people that want to see this more robust worker protection in the city. So that's kind of our focus now. Of course, like any organization that wants to sign on to help us protect safe and sick leave rights for New York City, we'll absolutely love your support. But yeah, more individuals signing on to this letter. I don't know if you want to add to that, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's what we gotta get. That's what we gotta get
That's what
done.
we need. Yeah.
We got,
Yeah.
like crank
Yeah.
in. So you know, the reply is due on the 14th.
Reply, yes.
You know, city council has to take action by then by sending what is called a letter of legislative intent to the court, right? Making it very clear, hey, we want the courts to enforce the rights. And here's the thing, it's actually in the caption of the legislation itself. It says very clearly so that our rights are enforced by the court, not just like grants and relief,
Right.
which is what's necessary to actually even make the legislation relevant in any kind of way, right? Because otherwise, I think the average, this is tricky to like get an exact number, but like on average for issues around employment law that go through New York Supreme Court, people are looking on average for like around like a 32-month like process to get to a verdict, and even longer after that to get folks actually any kind of action on that, right? And this is even when it's an extremely clear violation of the law, like clear as like somebody like breaking like windows or something, I don't know, like I don't know, somebody like there, it's something that is like clear, like you can see it, it's very evident, right? And like the court can take action as long as it's clear, and all that city council has to do is just make it clear to the courts through a letter of legislative intent that it is indeed the court's role to stop violations as they're happening. And that's a whole lot. Of course, the fight goes on, right? Because we don't want legislators to get us into the same kind of issue that happened with like Roe v. Wade, right? Where like courts established what the law was, right? That and how like the law governed us as Americans, right? And then like just not doing anything to codify it in legislation, right? Just to be, so we want legislators then to take action afterwards. And so we're in a process of engaging with workers, our co-workers, and workers in general, to help inform what does that legislation look like, because ultimately what really matters is how do these laws affect us as people working in our workplaces, right? We don't need any more make-believe legislation. It's fine and dandy for folks to pass bills, right? But it's a completely different thing for us as working people to experience those changes in our workplaces, in our in our homes,
in our lives, yeah.
General,
Yes.
yeah. So we're doing work to try to ensure that we're changing the way that this affects us at all of these angles. So we see ourselves as probably working on this for some time, and so even if people don't catch this before July 14th, still sign on to our letter to City Council. We'll get everybody together and we'll make sure that these rights actually apply to all of us.
Hell yeah.
I think that's really, really well put. Really appreciate that. And I guess I would ask, if we're talking about the ways in which working people actually feel the effect of legislation in their lives, that brings me back to the election. I guess I would ask you guys, as kind of a bonus question, does this change anything for your expectations for this case? How does now operating in a landscape where we potentially have a mayor who is in control of New York City, who is a member of the DSA, while you guys are trying to enforce rights that working people have? How does that change expectations? How does that change how you're viewing this whole process right now?
You can answer first, Jonathan.
Yeah. It's exciting to have this is the biggest mayoral election of probably American history. I mean, it's extremely significant. New York City, we have a multi-trillion-dollar economy. The largest economy of any city on planet Earth, and that to have somebody who has made like cost of living issues central to their campaign, that's really exciting. We look at it and we really hope that this results in a really strong alliance that allows us to be able to push forward effectively to support working people's rights in our city. Very exciting. And if I do say, we have had Hot Girls for Zoran sign on to our letter.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Hot Girls for Zoran.
Awesome.
We'll see if that results in the campaign, formally supporting in some way. We really hope so. But it does suggest also that what people want is for government to work for them as working people, right? And so it's been really hard. So far we've communicated some of this stuff to city council, right? We've had sometimes a little bit warmer responses and less warm responses. But this particular mayoral election is a very clear indicator to city council that, hey, if no one knows about this, right, you may be able to ignore it. But if everybody knows that this is on the table and that you chose to ignore taking action to protect, sick leave rights, right? People are not going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
So it's really awesome, seeing this election, just because it says so much about where we are as people. And that's the most important factor in actually changing, how government relates to us. If we understand our rights and we're pushing for changes and we're able to do that effectively, especially in an environment like this, where we'll say, hey, we don't care if you've been in government forever and have a bazillion qualifications. If you're not fighting for us, you're gone. In that environment, it has a lot of potential for us to actually be enforcing our rights, or pushing city council to make sure that, our rights are being enforced, that we have access to them, that our rights are real.
Very well said again. Hannah, how do you feel? How do you feel like this has changed things? Any thoughts on all of this, and just the kind of idea that as we've been talking about, it is pretty clear that after this election, in the wake of this election, it is abundantly clear to me that what working people are looking for is policy. And yes. I was just listening to it. I think Alyssa Slotkin saying something about she was, I forget who was interviewing her, but she was just talking about how she wanted to roll out a new vision for the Democratic Party, and how people don't want to hear policy, essentially. And it was just I don't even understand how anyone can come out after this election and say something so
tone deaf,
and so just the opposite lesson of what should have been learned, which is, not a surprise coming from the person that it's coming from, but also,
yeah,
I mean, it's just, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yes, absolutely. For me, I mean, like Jonathan and everybody else who, supported this campaign and voted for Zoran, I think the most important thing coming out of this is that people obviously want like different types of changes that work for their lives specifically, whether it be the workplace, whether it be, you know, cheaper groceries or whatever. I feel excited about it because the things that, you know, we are fighting for, you know, protecting, you know, workers' rights to safe and sick leave, for example, like our little fight over here in this corner. I mean, it's a big fight, but, you know, I do feel like there will be more support around it. And, you know, seeing like collective psychology, I guess, of like where we are as workers in New York City, it is very clear that these are the types of things that people want to see. So I'm very optimistic about that. And yeah, that's yeah, I'm optimistic and feel motivated to continue fighting for more worker protections and building a more, you know, healthy society for all people.
That is wonderful. I think that's a really good closing note. I guess I would just ask as a very, very last question, where can people find you guys? Where can they sign on to your letter? Where can they go to get updates on what's happening here?
So, you know, we're protectesta.org is the URL for our stuff. Right now, it is being forwarded towards Brand Workers' website.
Okay.
It is hosting, you know, our petition. So the important things for people to actually do to help make these changes happen is sign on to the letter to city council for yourself, right? The petition has like a really clear explanation of this stuff as well. Any organization that you're a part of, get your organization to sign on as well, right? It's a quick way to show, you know, how much, you know, like, you know, the way that we are organized as people and push to create changes. And it's honestly just a good habit to get into, because when those with power see that your whole group is supporting something, that says something about how they should relate to the question at hand, right? You'll be sent information to make it really easy for you to start bugging your city council member, right? When they can feel that, oh, people, yeah, like it's taking me 45 minutes to weed through my email inbox because that many people are asking for, you know, action to protect sick leave rights. That's significant. You know, people listen to that. And so in order for us to communicate to you, you know, like, you know, if you sign on, we'll have your information and we can make it really easy for all of us to push city council to take action, both for this court case and the letter of legislative intent, but also to get the legislation that really secures and protects these rights.
Excellent. That is great. Do you guys have anything that you want to add before I let you go?
Thank you so much for speaking with us and covering this story. We really appreciate your time and interest in, you know, helping us to get the word out about protecting our safe and sick leave rights for New York City workers.
Of course, I am so happy to talk with you guys. This was a really important conversation. And again, I think viewers are going to get a lot out of it. I'm sure that this is a case that they were not even aware it was happening. So I am glad that viewers will able to learn about all of this. And yeah, hopefully they will come out and support what you guys are doing. I think this is really important. I'm really glad that you guys, you know, wanted to come on and talk with me about it and share it with viewers. So I thank you both for your time. And again, yeah, for viewers of Status Coup, if you are watching this, you have not become a subscriber yet, you should do that. You don't want to miss more conversations like this. I was just talking with Hannah and Jonathan about everything that they have going on in New York City right now. You don't want to miss more conversations with regular working people who are fighting for their rights and our rights. If you have not become a member yet, you can become a member at statuscoup.com/join. And again, you can help us have more of these conversations and be more places on the ground. Hannah and Jonathan and I all met at the DSA watch party the other night for the election. So I would not have known about this case had we not met there, which, you know, necessitated me being on the ground, talking to the people, so you can support that work and support our conversations with working people by becoming a member. And I hope that you guys will. Again, Hannah and Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for explaining all of this to us. And I hope to hear some good updates from you guys soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.